Imagine standing at a hospital entrance, the midday sun blazing overhead, and a large German shepherd suddenly blocks your way, refusing to let anyone pass. At first it seems strange, maybe even dangerous, but then the dog won't move, barking with a desperate urgency, as if trying to say something only humans can't hear. What secret could possibly be hidden inside the hospital walls? What was so important that this loyal animal risked everything to stop strangers in their tracks? By the end of this story, you will discover how a stubborn dog led nurses and a war veteran to a miracle no one expected, and how a single act of instinct saved a life that could have been lost forever. The morning sun cast its golden light across the quiet suburban neighborhood, making the white walls of St. Mary's Community Hospital glow as though polished by the sky itself, and people moved in and out of the building with the casual rhythm of routine. Doctors clutching clipboards, nurses carrying trays, and patients shuffling in wheelchairs pushed by family members. No one expected anything unusual that day. Yet at precisely 10:30, a German shepherd appeared, trotting with determined steps from the street corner, its tawny coat gleaming under the sun, black saddle pattern stark against the light, and eyes sharp and intelligent, scanning the faces of everyone who passed. The dog was large, perhaps 80 pounds, clearly well fed, though slightly dirty around its paws, as though it had been wandering. Its ears stood tall, every flick signaling vigilance, and its bushy tail swayed, not in playfulness, but in tension. At first no one paid much attention. Dogs sometimes roamed near the hospital. Sometimes they followed their owners, or strayed too far from home. But this dog was different. Instead of meandering around the parking lot, sniffing grass or trash bins, it positioned itself squarely at the main entrance, planting its body firmly across the sliding doors so that no one could pass without confronting it. People murmured, a few patients hesitated, and a security guard frowned, unsure whether to chase it away. The shepherd did not growl or bare its teeth. Instead it barked, a deep, commanding bark that echoed through the concrete walls, sharp, insistent, and repetitive, almost like a message in a code no human could decipher. Each time someone tried to step past, the dog shifted its body sideways, blocking the way with a stance both protective and desperate, eyes fixed on the glass doors, as though something inside demanded its vigilance. Some laughed nervously, saying the dog must be lost or hungry. A mother clutched her child tighter, muttering about rabies. A few tried to lure the shepherd away with scraps from their lunch bags, but the dog ignored food entirely. It barked, then looked back at the entrance, then barked again, circling only to reposition itself more firmly, tail rigid like a soldier at his post. That was when Nurse Emily Hartman stepped outside, curiosity pulling her away from her shift. Emily was 31, with shoulder-length chestnut hair pulled into a neat ponytail, pale skin freckled from years of outdoor runs, and hazel eyes that carried both warmth and sharp intuition. She wore light blue scrubs and white sneakers that squeaked faintly on the hospital tiles. Known among her colleagues for her calm under pressure and her habit of asking questions others overlooked, Emily had a reputation as the nurse who noticed details that saved lives. And now she noticed the strange desperation in this animal's behavior. "Easy, boy," she murmured, crouching slightly to appear less threatening. The shepherd's ears twitched. It barked again, louder this time, and stepped backward, still guarding the doorway. Emily reached out a hand cautiously, noting the tension in its muscles, the steady breathing, the eyes that flickered with something she could only describe as pleading. This wasn't aggression. It was communication. Behind her, Dr. Alan Morris, a tall man in his late 40s, with neatly trimmed salt and pepper hair and glasses perched on his nose, joined the small gathering. His crisp white coat, gave him authority, though his face carried the weariness of long shifts. "What's going on here?" he asked, scanning the crowd. Emily explained quickly, "The dog won't let anyone through. It's not attacking, but it's stopping us." Dr. Morris frowned, probably looking for its owner. But when he tried to step forward, the shepherd growled low, not vicious but warning, then barked, blocking him again. The doctor stepped back, surprised. "That's strange," he muttered. Meanwhile, a group of paramedics unloading supplies from an ambulance stopped to watch. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with tattoos peeking from under his sleeve, remarked, "Looks like it's guarding something." Emily nodded slowly. She studied the shepherd again, the scuffed paws, the panting, the unwavering focus on the hospital doors. Her gut told her this was not random. Animals behave this way for reasons humans often overlooked. "What if it's trying to tell us something?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The security guard, growing impatient, reached for his radio. "We can call animal control." But before he could, the shepherd barked furiously, then dashed a few steps toward the parking lot before stopping, turning back and barking again as though urging them to follow. Some gasped. Emily's heart skipped. She recognized that behavior. It was guiding, not threatening. "Wait," she said sharply, holding up her hand. "Don't chase it away." The shepherd barked again, running a few more steps, then stopping, ears pinned back, tail straight like an arrow pointing the way. "It wants us to come," Emily declared. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Skepticism, curiosity, fear. They mixed into an uneasy brew. Most people hesitated, unwilling to risk following a stray animal. But Emily, driven by instinct, stepped forward. "I'll go," she announced, though her pulse raced. She had seen enough strange cases in her nursing career to know that sometimes following intuition led to truth. The shepherd's eyes lit up, and it barked once, sharply, then trotted a few paces ahead, checking to see if she followed. Emily did. A few others, Dr. Morris, the paramedic, and even the skeptical security guard, joined, forming an unlikely group chasing a dog across the bright hospital courtyard. The air was thick with questions. Why was this dog so insistent? What did it know that they didn't? Emily's sneakers slapped against the pavement as she quickened her pace, heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something far more serious than anyone imagined, and as the shepherd led them toward the hospital's side wing, where an old storage entrance had long been unused, she wondered if this single, determined animal was about to reveal a secret that would change everything. The German shepherd's paws struck the pavement with steady urgency as it guided the small group away from the hospital's main entrance, leading them along a narrow path beside the building where few people ever went anymore, past a row of weathered bricks stained by years of rain and sun, toward a metal side door that had long been considered useless since the hospital had remodeled its wings. The dog stopped suddenly, ears erect, and barked, its body rigid, eyes darting from the door to the humans who followed. Emily Hartman, her chestnut hair sticking to her forehead as the heat of the day pressed down, slowed her pace and felt a prickle of unease crawl along her skin. Why here? She glanced at Dr. Alan Morris, who looked skeptical but cautious, then at the burly paramedic whose expression softened despite his tough exterior, and finally at the security guard, who seemed annoyed yet reluctant to act. The shepherd barked again, pawing at the base of the door, nails scraping metal with a sharpness that cut through the silence, and then it whined, lowering its head as though pleading. Emily crouched slightly, studying the dog's movements. This was no coincidence. Something, or someone, was on the other side. She reached for the handle, but before she could touch it, a voice rang out behind them. "Don't open that door just yet." The group turned in unison, and there stood a man whose presence immediately commanded attention, not because of aggression, but because of the silent weight he carried in his posture. He was tall, broad-shouldered, though slightly stooped, with weathered skin tanned from years under unforgiving skies, and a neatly trimmed beard peppered with gray along a strong jawline. His dark eyes were sharp, deep-set under brows that hinted at decades of struggle, and a faded scar traced across his right cheek, a mark of battles past. He wore a simple olive-green jacket, frayed at the sleeves, military dog tags glinting faintly in the daylight, and jeans that bore the wear of countless journeys. On his left arm, a faded tattoo of an eagle clutched a banner, though the ink had blurred over time. This was James Carter, a 52-year-old veteran who had served 2 tours overseas and returned home carrying the invisible weight of memories that never left him. For years, James had lived quietly in the outskirts of town, haunted by insomnia, sustained by discipline, and kept alive by the loyalty of his companion, this very German shepherd named Rex, whom he had rescued as a pup during a storm years earlier. The bond between man and dog was not one of owner and pet, but of soldiers in arms, comrades who had faced solitude, hardship, and the edge of despair together. James approached with careful steps, boots crunching gravel, his gaze fixed on the group and then on Reeks, who barked once in recognition before resuming its urgent stance near the door. "What's happening?" Emily asked, trying to steady her voice, struck by the man's intensity. James exhaled slowly, his voice gravelly, carrying both authority and weariness. "Rex doesn't behave like this, unless something's wrong. He's trained to alert me when danger or distress is near. If he's here, it means there's something inside that room you all need to see." The security guard scoffed lightly, though unease flickered in his eyes. "With respect, sir, this is hospital property. That door hasn't been used in years." James's gaze hardened. "Do you hear him? He's not just barking. He's warning." Emily, trusting her instincts, pressed. "What's inside, Mr. Carter? James Carter," he said. "I don't know exactly what's in there, but I can tell you this. Rex wouldn't risk himself, wouldn't drag me here, unless it mattered." Rex barked again, louder, then pawed with such force the door rattled on its hinges. Emily's pulse quickened. She looked to Dr. Morris, who adjusted his glasses nervously. "It could be nothing. Or—" His words trailed off, the thought unspoken but heavy. James stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the sunlit pavement, and crouched beside Rex, resting a calloused hand gently on the dog's back. His touch was steady, his movements practiced, the kind of calm that came from years of facing chaos. "Easy, boy," he murmured. Rex whined, eyes locked on the door. James rose, turning back to the others. "I say we open it." The security guard shifted uneasily, muttering about protocol, but Emily cut in firmly. "If there's even the slightest chance someone's in there, we can't ignore it." The paramedic nodded in agreement, his arms folded across his chest, the tattoos on his forearms flexing as he spoke. "I've seen animals alert to things before. Fires, seizures, babies left in cars. Sometimes they know before we do." That sealed it. Emily reached for the handle again, her hand trembling despite her outward resolve. James stood close, ready to assist, his scar catching the light as he squinted against the sun. With a deep breath, she pushed. The door creaked, hinges groaning from neglect, and a stale wave of air wafted out, carrying with it the faint but unmistakable scent of something organic, something that made every hair on Emily's arms stand on end. Inside, shadows pooled, and dust motes danced in beams of sunlight that slanted through cracks in boarded windows. Rex surged forward, pulling James with surprising strength. "Wait!" James commanded, though his voice held urgency rather than restraint. He let the dog lead, trusting its instincts. The group followed, stepping into the forgotten storage wing, where broken furniture lay scattered, medical carts rusted, and old gurneys leaned against walls like relics of abandonment. The atmosphere was heavy, almost sacred in its silence, broken only by the sharp tap of Rex's claws on the linoleum floor and the faint hum of distant hospital machinery through the walls. Then came the sound that froze them all. A soft cry, faint, fragile, the cry of an infant. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, heart racing with both dread and hope. The paramedic's face went pale. "No way!" Rex barked furiously now, running toward a cluster of broken cabinets piled against the far wall. He clawed, whined, and shoved his snout between the gaps. James's chest tightened, memories of chaotic battlefields where children sometimes cried amidst rubble flooding his mind, but he forced himself to stay focused. He rushed forward, pushing aside the debris with raw strength, metal screeching as he dragged away the barrier. And there, nestled inside a makeshift cradle of blankets, dirty but still protective, lay a tiny baby, no more than a few months old, its face flushed from crying, small fists waving helplessly. The infant's eyes blinked open, watery and blue, gazing up at the strangers who had stumbled into its hidden world. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She dropped to her knees, gently scooping the child into her arms, murmuring soothing words as tears pricked her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered, voice breaking. The baby quieted almost instantly against her chest, sensing safety at last. James stood rigid, his fists clenched, staring at the fragile life Rex had uncovered. The scar on his face seemed to burn as memories of war mingled with the present. Innocence caught in crossfire, lives saved and lost. But this was different. This was salvation born from instinct, from a dog's refusal to give up. The room filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the baby's soft coos and Rex's steady breathing, proud and protective. Dr. Morris finally found his voice, though it quivered. Who would leave a child here?" No one answered, for the question carried a weight none of them were ready to bear. But as Emily cradled the baby, and Rex sat tall like a sentinel, James Carter knew this was not just chance. This was fate, a moment where past and present collided, where his scars and his companion's loyalty intersected with a fragile life waiting to be saved. And deep within his heart, a spark long extinguished began to flicker again. The possibility of redemption. The abandoned storage room seemed to shrink around them as the weight of discovery pressed heavily on everyone present, dust floating in shafts of daylight and the faint scent of mildew clinging to their lungs. But none of that mattered compared to the fragile life Emily now cradled in her arms, the baby's soft whimpers subsiding into tiny hiccups, as though exhaustion had finally won the battle over fear. Emily's hazel eyes glistened as she gently rocked the infant, her steady hands guided by years of nursing experience, but her heart racing with emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now," she whispered, though in truth she was trying to convince herself just as much as the child. Dr. Morris stepped closer, his professional instincts kicking in despite the tremor in his voice. "We need to get that baby examined immediately. Dehydration, malnutrition, possible exposure. We can't take risks." He adjusted his glasses, trying to steady himself in the chaos of the moment. The paramedic nodded firmly, his tattooed arms crossing as he surveyed the scene. But James Carter remained still, his dark eyes fixed on the child, the scar on his cheek twitching slightly as memories surged unbidden. He remembered carrying wounded comrades, hearing cries in shattered villages overseas, moments when innocence was swallowed by conflict. He thought he had buried those memories, But now, staring at this baby, he felt them clawing their way back, reminding him of both the losses he had endured and the lives he had once saved. Rex sat faithfully beside him, tail sweeping once across the dusty floor, golden brown eyes locked protectively on the infant, as though daring the world to threaten it again. Emily turned to James, her voice trembling yet resolute. "If your dog hadn't led us here, this baby, it might not have survived another hour." James exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy with the truth. "Rex always knows. He feels things before I do. He saved me more times than I can count. And now—" His voice broke, trailing off into silence as he looked away, ashamed of the tears threatening to rise. The security guard, visibly unsettled, muttered, "How does a baby even end up here? This wing has been locked for years. Why would someone—" His words fell into the emptiness, for there was no logical explanation, only a gnawing dread that lingered in every corner of the room. Dr. Morris gestured toward the door, urgency hardening his tone. "Speculation can wait. We need to move. Emily, carry the child. James, if you and your dog can stay close, it might help keep the baby calm." Without argument, the group made their way back into the sunlight, the warmth of day suddenly feeling harsher against their skin. Onlookers gasped as Emily emerged, clutching the infant, Rex walking loyally at her side, with the regal bearing of a knight who had fulfilled his duty. Whispers spread quickly among patients and staff who had gathered outside. "A baby? Where did it come from? Was it abandoned?" The questions buzzed, but no answers followed. Inside the emergency ward, Emily laid the baby gently on a clean examination bed as nurses rushed forward with blankets, IV fluids, and monitors. The tiny life was enveloped in the sterile efficiency of medicine, though the human heartbeats surrounding it were far from steady. Dr. Morris checked vitals, murmuring instructions with practiced focus, but his eyes betrayed his disbelief. "Stable for now," he said finally, voice low, "but this child has been without proper care for at least several hours, maybe longer." Emily brushed a strand of hair from her damp forehead and glanced at James, who stood near the doorway, dog tags glinting faintly as Rex pressed close to his leg. The veteran's presence filled the room with a strange sense of gravity, as though his very existence was tied to the fate of the child. "We need to alert the authorities," the security guard said gruffly, his nerves fraying. "This is more than a medical matter. Someone left a baby in there. That's a crime." James's jaw tightened, his voice low but cutting. "Someone also chose a place where the child might never be found. If Rex hadn't been there, if we hadn't listened—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Emily's gaze softened as she looked at him. She saw the discipline in his posture, the pain etched into his scar, and the unspoken battle behind his eyes. He was a man shaped by survival, yet haunted by it. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "your dog may have just saved this baby's life. That makes both of you part of this story, whether you want to be or not." For the first time in years, James allowed himself a small, fleeting smile, though it faded quickly. "I didn't save anyone," he muttered. "Rex did. He always does." Hours passed, and the hospital moved with its usual rhythm, though whispers of the abandoned baby spread through every corridor. Police officers arrived, their radios crackling, notebooks ready, but their questions yielded little more than frustration. No one had seen anyone suspicious. Security footage showed nothing near the storage wing. It was as though the baby had simply appeared, placed deliberately in that hidden room, with the intent of being forgotten. Emily sat in the break room afterward, her hands still trembling slightly, as she held a cup of lukewarm coffee. Her mind raced with images of the baby's watery blue eyes, the way it had calmed against her chest, and the uncanny sense of destiny that had woven James, Rex, and herself together in that moment. James entered quietly, his presence heavy, yet grounding. He moved with the precision of a soldier, even when simply sitting across from her, Rex settling obediently at his feet. For a while, silence stretched, filled only by the hum of a vending machine. Finally, Emily broke it. "You, look at that baby like you've seen this before." James's gaze darkened, his voice low. "I have seen children abandoned in worse places. War zones, camps, cities torn apart by chaos. I thought coming home meant leaving that behind. But sometimes it finds you again." Emily studied him, seeing the layers of pain behind his words. "And yet you came when Rex called. You followed, even when no one else wanted to. That says something, James." His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "It says I trust my dog more than I trust most people." She smiled faintly at that, though sadness lingered in her expression. Maybe that trust is exactly what saved that baby. The conversation was cut short by the sound of footsteps. Dr. Morris appeared in the doorway, looking more tired than usual. "The baby's stable for now, but we still don't know who left it or why. Social services will get involved, but until then, we're keeping a close watch." James rose slowly, his height imposing even in stillness. He looked toward the ward where the baby slept, guarded by machines and caring hands. Something stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, an ache not of loss, but of possibility. Rex's ears perked, as if sensing his master's shift in thought. Emily noticed, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "This isn't over, James. Whoever left that baby, whatever the reason, it's only the beginning." James nodded once, his scar catching the fluorescent light, and for the first time since returning home from war, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he had stepped into a new mission. Not one assigned by generals or governments, but by fate itself, delivered through the bark of a loyal dog and the fragile cry of a forgotten child. The following morning, sunlight poured through the hospital's tall windows, streaking across the sterile white floors, as though trying to cleanse the unease that had settled overnight. Yet despite the brightness, shadows of unanswered questions hung heavy in every corridor. Whispers of the abandoned baby, following nurses from station to station, and rumors spreading faster than facts ever could. Emily Hartman walked briskly toward the pediatric ward, her sneakers squeaking faintly, her chestnut hair tied neatly, but strands escaping in the rush, her hazel eyes tired from a night of restless thoughts. She pushed open the ward door and found the infant sleeping peacefully in a crib, tiny chest rising and falling, beneath a blanket that had been carefully tucked around it. Machines beeped softly, vital signs stable, but the mystery of its presence gnawed at her, like an unfinished puzzle. Standing near the crib was James Carter, the veteran's tall frame silhouetted against the sunlight, filtering through blinds, his olive green jacket still rumpled from the day before, his dark eyes watching the baby with an intensity that was neither threatening nor casual, but deeply protective. At his side, Rex lay curled, head on paws, though his amber eyes never truly closed, ever watchful. Emily paused at the sight, struck by how natural it looked, man, dog, and child, framed in quiet harmony, as though fate had placed them together deliberately. "You're here early," she said softly, breaking the silence. James didn't turn at first, his voice gravelly but calm. "Didn't sleep. Rex didn't either. He keeps pacing, checking the doors, like he knows there's more to this." Emily moved closer, glancing down at Rex, who wagged his tail faintly in acknowledgement, but remained alert. He saved the baby once. Maybe he's afraid someone will come back. James finally turned, the scar on his cheek catching the light. Animals sense things we can't. Rex has warned me about ambushes, storms, even people who meant harm before they acted. If he's uneasy, it's because something isn't right. Before Emily could reply, the door opened, and 2 police detectives entered, their presence sharp and commanding. Detective Karen Blake, a woman in her early 40s with short blonde hair cut to her jawline, sharp green eyes, and a tailored navy suit, carried herself with brisk efficiency, every movement precise as though orchestrated. Beside her was Detective Miguel Torres, mid-30s, clean-shaven with a square jaw, olive skin, and a calm but probing demeanor, his charcoal suit slightly rumpled, but his eyes keen. They introduced themselves quickly, flashing badges, their tone clipped. "We need to ask some questions," Blake began, her voice firm but not unkind. Emily straightened instinctively, protective instincts rising. "Of course, but keep your voices down. The baby needs rest." Blake nodded curtly, but wasted no time. "We've reviewed security footage. No one entered the storage wing in the last 48 hours, except your group. That means whoever left the child did it before then, or found a way not to be seen. Either way, it wasn't accidental." Torres added, his voice low but steady. "We also searched the room. No fingerprints, no clothing tags, nothing identifiable. Whoever abandoned the baby went to great lengths to erase evidence." James's brow furrowed, his voice cutting into the silence. "That means they didn't just panic and leave it behind. They planned it." Blake studied him, eyes flickering over the scar, the dog tags, and the loyal shepherd at his side. "And you are?" "James Carter, veteran. Rex is my dog. He found the baby." Blake's gaze lingered on Rex, curiosity breaking through her professional mask. "Smart animal." James's jaw tightened. "Smarter than most people I've known." Emily spoke before tension could rise. "The important thing is the baby is alive. Can't that be enough for now?" Blake shook her head slightly, her voice firm. "Alive, yes. Safe? That remains to be seen. Until we know who left the child and why, we can't assume anything." Torres leaned forward slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "Do you think anyone here at the hospital could be involved? Staff, maybe? Someone who knew this wing was empty?" The question chilled the room. Emily's immediate instinct was to defend her colleagues, but uncertainty clawed at her. Hospitals were filled with all kinds of people, dedicated healers, overworked staff, and sometimes those hiding things. James broke the silence, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of steel. If someone inside knew, then leaving the child there wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. And that means the baby might still be in danger. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching as if affirming his master's words. The detectives asked a flurry of questions. Who was present when the baby was found? Whether anyone had noticed suspicious individuals, whether the child showed signs of trafficking or abandonment. Every answer only deepened the mystery. Finally, Blake closed her notebook with a snap. "We'll continue investigating, but until we know more, we recommend limiting who has access to this room." Emily bristled slightly. "That's a child, not evidence." Blake's green eyes softened for just a moment. "I know, but trust me, if someone went to this much trouble to hide a baby, they might come back for it. Or worse." The detectives left as quickly as they arrived, leaving silence in their wake. Emily turned to James, frustration tightening her chest. "They talk like this baby is a case file, not a human being." James's dark eyes softened as he looked at her. "They have to. It's how they cope. But you're right. To us, it's more. He looked at Rex, who now stood, tail stiff, posture alert. And Rex agrees. Emily exhaled, rubbing her temples. So what now? James stepped closer to the crib, gazing at the sleeping child. Now we wait, and we watch, because I have a feeling whoever left this baby isn't done yet. The rest of the day unfolded with a strange rhythm. Nurses checked vitals, doctors made rounds, and patients carried on with their recoveries. But beneath the surface lay a current of unease. Staff whispered in hallways. Parents clutched their children tighter, and security doubled patrols. Emily moved through her shift mechanically, though her thoughts never strayed far from the ward. Each time she passed, she caught sight of James in his silent vigil. Rex ever faithful at his side, their presence like guardians carved from resilience and instinct. Later that evening, as the sky outside shifted to shades of gold and amber, Emily found herself once more in the break room, nursing a cup of tea instead of coffee this time, trying to calm the restless energy inside her. James joined quietly, settling across from her, his broad shoulders filling the small space. For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence thick, but not uncomfortable. Finally, Emily spoke. You stayed all day. James shrugged, eyes downcast. I've stayed longer in worse places. This feels like a mission, and I don't walk away from missions. Emily studied him, noting the weariness etched into the lines of his face, the way his scar seemed to deepen with every word. You've lost people before, haven't you? He didn't flinch, but his silence was answer enough. She pressed gently. And now you see this baby as a second chance? His eyes lifted, piercing hers with a raw intensity. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it means to be abandoned. The words hung heavy, echoing louder than the hum of machines or the distant chatter of staff. Emily felt her throat tighten, empathy swelling. Then maybe you and this baby have more in common than you think. Rex nudged James's leg with his nose, as if to remind him he wasn't alone, and James reached down, scratching the dog's ear with rough tenderness. In that moment, Emily realized something profound. This wasn't just about a baby found in a forgotten wing. It was about fractured souls. James, haunted by war. Herself, burdened by the weight of constant caregiving. And Rex, the silent guardian who bound them together. And though none of them said it aloud, they all knew. The true story had only just begun, and the danger was far from over. Night had settled over the city, but inside the hospital the lights burned brightly, corridors buzzing with artificial life, even as the world outside grew still. And yet in the pediatric ward where the rescued infant lay, the air felt charged with something unseen, as though the walls themselves held their breath. Emily Hartman moved through her rounds with precision, but her mind lingered on the child, the way its tiny fingers had curled around hers earlier, so fragile, yet filled with a strange strength that unsettled her. She found herself pausing by the ward more often than necessary, stealing glances at the crib where the baby slept under Rex's constant vigilance. James seated nearby like a soldier on post, his broad shoulders bent slightly forward, his scar catching faint light in sharp relief, his eyes never straying far from the door. At first it seemed paranoia, but then the little things began to stack, shadows moving where none should, footsteps echoing in hallways only to fade abruptly. A phone at the nurse's station, ringing once in the middle of the night with no caller on the line. Emily felt the hairs on her neck rise with every oddity, though she kept telling herself hospitals bred strange moments when fatigue played tricks. Still, Rex was not so easily deceived. The shepherd's ears pricked often, his head lifting, growl rumbling low in his throat when empty air seemed to shift unnaturally, his amber eyes scanning corners as if daring something to reveal itself. James trusted those instincts more than cameras or locks, and he stayed awake long after exhaustion should have taken him. Just past midnight, Emily joined him, bringing 2 mugs of coffee, her hands trembling slightly, though she disguised it with a smile. "You look like you could use this," she said softly, offering him the steaming cup. James accepted with a faint nod, his voice low. "Thanks. Long night." Emily lowered herself into the chair beside him, her gaze flickering toward the baby. "Do you ever think you're imagining it? The feeling that something's coming?" James shook his head slowly, taking a sip before replying. "No. War teaches you the difference between nerves and warnings. This is a warning." Before Emily could respond, Rex stiffened, his entire body taut, ears sharp, teeth bared in a silent snarl. James was on his feet instantly, eyes narrowing. The hallway beyond the ward was empty, sterile lights humming, but the air felt wrong, too heavy, too still. Then came the faintest creak, like a door opening somewhere it shouldn't. Emily's pulse raced, her mind scrambling between logic and instinct. "Probably just staff," she whispered, though doubt laced every word. James moved silently toward the door, muscles coiled, Rex stalking beside him like a shadow. He eased the door open and stepped into the hall, scanning. For a moment, nothing. Then he saw it, a figure at the far end, dressed in scrubs, but moving too, quickly, glancing back once before slipping into a stairwell. James didn't hesitate. "Stay with the baby," he barked, already sprinting, Rex surging ahead like a missile of fur and muscle. Emily froze for half a beat, then rushed back to the crib, heart pounding, her eyes darting to the child who stirred faintly but did not wake. She whispered assurances neither the baby nor she truly believed. In the stairwell, James thundered downward, his boots echoing, breath steady, instincts sharp. The figure was fast, but Rex was faster, the dog leaping down flights with terrifying grace. James caught glimpses of the runner, slender, masked, their movements too practiced for coincidence. This wasn't a desperate parent. This was someone with training. They burst into the basement level, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, pipes lining the ceiling. The intruder darted toward a side exit, only to skid to a halt when Rex lunged, blocking the path, growling low and deadly. James closed the distance, voice cutting the air. "Who are you? Why the baby?" The figure hesitated, then tossed something small and metallic onto the floor. A flash grenade. James's instincts screamed and he turned his head just as light exploded, searing his vision, Rex barking furiously. By the time his sight cleared, the intruder was gone, the side door swinging on its hinges, night air rushing in with the faint scent of exhaust. Cursing under his breath, James pulled Rex back, retreating toward the stairwell. He knew pursuit was useless in his current state, but the encounter confirmed everything he feared. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted the child, badly. Back in the ward, Emily jumped when the door burst open, James storming in with Rex, both bristling with frustration. "They were here," James said sharply. Emily's eyes widened. "Who?" "Not staff. Trained. Masked. They used a flash grenade to escape." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her face pale. "Then the baby?" James shook his head firmly. "They didn't get near. Rex made sure." The dog huffed, as though proud, but still restless. Emily exhaled shakily, her knees weak. "What does this mean? Why would anyone go to these lengths for a baby?" James's jaw clenched. "Because this isn't just a baby. Whoever left it knew exactly what they were doing. And now, Whoever wants it back isn't going to stop. Silence pressed on them, broken only by the baby's soft breathing. Emily sank into the chair, trembling, her voice breaking. This is a hospital. We're supposed to save lives, not fight off whatever this is. James crouched beside her, his hand steady on her arm. We will. But you need to understand. This is no longer just about medicine or care. This is survival. Hours later, Detectives Blake and Torres arrived, summoned urgently. James relayed every detail, his account sharp, unflinching. Blake paced, tension etched into every line of her face. So, someone infiltrated wearing scrubs, avoided cameras, nearly took the child, and had military-grade equipment. She stopped, turning sharply. That's not desperation. That's organized. Torres frowned, jotting notes, his voice thoughtful. Which means this baby isn't random. Someone powerful is involved, and they want it hidden or recovered. Emily, still shaken, whispered, But it's just a baby. What could possibly make it worth all this? Neither detective answered, but the silence was heavier than words. Later, when the ward quieted again, Emily found herself alone with James and Rex. The baby nestled in its crib, unaware of the storm circling. She leaned against the window, staring at the moonlight spilling over the city. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. James looked at her, puzzled. Regret what? Being the one who found it. If Rex hadn't pulled you into that room, none of this would be your problem. James studied her quietly, then shook his head. I don't regret it. Fate puts things in front of us for a reason. I was meant to find that child. Maybe Rex knew it before I did. Emily turned toward him, her voice softer. And what if fate meant for you to protect it at the cost of everything else? James's scarred face softened, shadows deepening under his eyes. Then that's what I'll do. Because I've lost too many battles. I won't lose this one. Rex stirred, laying his head against James's knee, eyes fixed on the crib, as if silently swearing the same oath. And as Emily watched them, soldier, dog, and child, framed by the silver wash of moonlight, she knew something unspoken. The shadows were closing in, and before long, the true enemy would reveal itself, demanding a reckoning none of them could yet imagine. The morning sun broke across the city, with a brilliance that felt almost cruel, casting long golden beams into hospital corridors, still haunted by the specter of last night's attack. But in the pediatric ward, where the child slept peacefully beneath a soft blanket, the light felt like a promise that perhaps not all was lost. James sat near the crib, his body weary yet unyielding, one hand absently stroking Rex's fur, while the other rested on the arm of the chair, fingers tapping restlessly, his mind turning over every possibility of what might come next. Emily entered quietly, a clipboard pressed to her chest, her auburn hair catching sunlight like strands of fire, her eyes rimmed with fatigue, but burning with resolve. She paused at the sight of James and Rex, the unspoken bond between man, dog, and child, so strong it was almost tangible. The detectives are coming back today, she said softly. They think they've found something about the baby's origin. James's gaze lifted, sharp and steady. And? Emily hesitated before replying. They said it may be political, that the baby isn't just abandoned. It's connected to people who will stop at nothing to erase its existence. The words hung heavy in the sterile air, filling the silence with dread. Before James could respond, the door burst open, Detective Blake stepping inside with Torres at her side, both looking more tense than ever. Blake's voice was brisk. We have confirmation. The child was born to a woman under protective custody, a whistleblower against a powerful corporate entity funneling resources illegally. That woman was silenced. Her child, this child, was hidden, meant to disappear. Someone inside the system tipped them off, and now those same people want the baby gone before its existence can be used as proof of her testimony. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her heart pounding with horror. So this baby? It's evidence? Blake nodded grimly. More than evidence. It's a symbol. If revealed, it connects names, crimes, and corruption at the highest level. That's why the intruders came. They're not kidnappers. They're erasers. James rose to his feet slowly, his voice cold, resolute. Then they won't have this child. Not while I breathe. Blake studied him for a long moment, then said, "You may not have a choice. They'll come again and in greater force. We can arrange protective custody, but the moment we move the baby, we risk exposure." The conversation fractured into plans and logistics, but James heard only the pounding of his pulse, the echo of war drums he thought he had left behind overseas. Yet something inside him steeled further, a clarity forged by fire. This wasn't just a battle of survival. It was destiny. As if sensing his determination, Rex barked sharply, ears pricked, eyes burning with loyalty. That afternoon, the attack came. Black vans screeched to a halt outside the hospital, men in tactical gear spilling out with ruthless efficiency. Panic rippled through the wards, alarms blaring, patients crying out in fear. Emily grabbed the crib, her hands trembling as she whispered to the baby, "Hold on. Hold on." James took position at the entrance, Rex by his side, his scarred face hard as stone, eyes scanning like a hawk. The first intruder shoved through the door, weapon raised, only to be met with Rex's feral lunge, teeth sinking into padded armor, dragging the man down with a roar. James moved with the precision of a soldier, disarming another with brutal efficiency, his fists and elbows striking with practiced fury. Emily shielded the baby with her body, ducking low behind equipment as chaos erupted around them. Blake and Torres arrived moments later with backup, their shouts filling the hallway as police engaged the attackers. The hospital became a battlefield, white walls splattered with the violence of desperation. Amid the storm, James's voice cut through, steady and commanding. "Emily, get to the stairwell, now!" She obeyed, pushing the crib forward, her fear overridden by sheer instinct to protect the life entrusted to them. James and Rex carved a path, the dog's growls thunderous, the man's fists unrelenting, together an unstoppable wall of flesh and fury. They reached the rooftop, the baby cradled against Emily's chest, her breath ragged. The sky stretched wide above, sunlight glaring, helicopters circling as police sirens wailed below. But the enemy was not finished. A figure emerged from the stairwell, the same masked leader from before, moving with deadly grace. James stepped forward, body shielding Emily and the child, Rex snarling at his side. "It ends here," James growled. The leader's voice was distorted by the mask, cold as steel. "Step aside. You don't understand what you're protecting." James's jaw tightened. "I understand enough. You want to erase innocence to bury guilt. That's all I need to know." The leader lunged, and the rooftop exploded into a brutal dance of survival. James fought with the desperation of a man who had already buried too many comrades, his every strike fueled by the ghosts of war and the promise he'd made to himself never to lose another innocent. Rex joined the fray, leaping, biting, holding fast. Emily screamed as the baby stirred, crying loudly, its tiny voice piercing the madness like a beacon of life, refusing to be silenced. In that moment, something broke the leader's focus. Perhaps the cry of the infant, perhaps the ferocity of man and dog united, and James seized the opening, driving the masked figure back with a final devastating blow. The intruder staggered, teetered on the edge, then fell into the abyss below, swallowed by sirens and chaos. Silence hung on the rooftop, broken only by Emily's sobs and the baby's cries. James collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, Rex pressing against him, bloodied but alive. Blake and Torres burst through the door moments later, weapons ready, only to stop at the sight. James holding the crying infant close, his scarred face softened by tears he could not hold back. Rex leaning protectively against them, Emily at his side, trembling with relief. Later, when the dust settled and the city exhaled, the truth emerged. The baby, now under government protection, would grow as the living proof of corruption undone, its survival sparking an investigation that brought powerful figures to justice. Emily continued her work at the hospital, forever changed by the night she became guardian to something greater than herself. Blake and Torres received commendations, though they knew credit belonged to the man and his dog who stood against the darkness. And James, scarred veteran, haunted soldier, reluctant hero, found something he thought he had lost long ago. Purpose, not in medals or battles, but in the fragile heartbeat of a child who had survived because he refused to walk away. On a quiet afternoon, weeks later, James stood outside the hospital, Rex at his side, sunlight warm against their skin and fur. Emily joined him, her hand brushing against his as they watched the world pass by. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "why it had to be you?" James looked down at Rex, who gazed back with steady, knowing eyes, then at the memory of the baby's tiny hand clutching his finger. "Maybe," he said slowly, "because some battles choose us, and maybe this time we won." Rex barked once, sharp and proud, and together they walked into the light, leaving behind a story that would forever be whispered in the halls of the hospital. Of a dog who refused to move, a veteran who refused to give up, and a miracle that refused to be erased.